What's up, beautiful people? I hope you're doing very well today. We're going to be checking out a video by Steven Pinker. This one is titled, Why Do Progressives Hate Progress? It's funny because recently we just saw a video from Thomas Sowell and it was the exact same title, Why Do Progressives Hate Progress? His summary was, their ideology does not support progress. That is just the summary of the Thomas Sowell video. But this one got me very interested. I want to hear a different perspective of what Steven Pinker might think. So let's check it out.
Why do progressives hate progress? Well, one answer could be that progress is a myth, that if you believe in progress, you are a Pangloss, a Pollyanna, you're a advocate of Chamber of Commerce, Silicon Valley, rah-rah, boardroom, optimistic capitalism. But as a matter of fact, progress can be demonstrated quantitatively. And so I think there really is an issue as to why it is so often denigrated and denied. But first I just want to establish the premise that there is such a thing as progress. Here are some examples. If you plot war deaths per capita since the end of World War II, it's a roller coaster with some ups and downs, but the overwhelming trend is downward, and a fraction of the number of people die in war compared to the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Despite a lot of talk about a democratic recession and obvious cases such as Turkey and Russia, the overall trend of democratization, the second wave, is continuing, not at the same rate as in the 1980s, but if you add up the countries, give them a democracy score, subtract the autocracy score from the democracy score, it continues to increase across the world. Homicides have been in decline, both for the United States and the world. Life expectancy has gone up in every region, and so the shortest...
Look at Africa. Africa is doing pretty well too.
Lives part of the world. Africa, people live longer than people lived in the longest lived parts of the world just a few decades ago. Extreme poverty may even vanish in the lifetimes of people in this room. The World Bank...
Really? People would argue that life is harder now than it used to be. But he's showing that extreme poverty, even up to 2020, is a lot lower from 1820. 1820 was about 90%. Really? Elders, please talk to us. And I know, like, there's nobody that old in my channel, but if you've been maybe like from the 1940s, 1960s, and you want to talk to us about this, if you think life is a lot easier now than it was back in the day, feel free to let me know. Because you see, he has up to 2000. Even in 2000, from 2000 is still down, which means we're enjoying now compared to people back in 2000.
Set a target of 2030 for the elimination of extreme poverty by their definition, and that's certainly the way the world is going. 10% of the world now is estimated to be in extreme poverty. That's still 700 million people, but as you can see, not long ago, a majority of the world's population lived in extreme poverty. And this extends to many aspects of quality of the environment. This is my favorite graph on the state of the environment. I got it from the EPA website, and it turns out they kind of distorted the axes to prove the point. But even if you relinearize the axes, you see that since the 1970s, while GDP has increased, number of vehicle miles traveled has increased as the United States population, energy has increased, CO2 has started to level off, but during this entire time, the 5 major pollutants have declined. So the idea that you can have economic growth or you can have environmental improvement, but you can't have both, is directly negated by this graph. The proportion of the world's surface that is protected from economic development and exploitation has continued to increase, and the amount of carbon you have to release into the atmosphere per dollar of GDP has declined. So those are some good signs. What makes progress possible? In a forthcoming book called Enlightenment Now, The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress, I argue that there are 2 big ideas that have propelled this progress over the last couple of centuries. One of them science and reason more generally, the idea that problems are solvable given the right knowledge. And the other is humanism, that the problems that we ought to solve are how to get as many people as possible to live long, healthy, prosperous, and pleasant lives. Now, given all of these positive trends over the last 70 years, how have they been reflected in the news? Well, here's one more graph. This comes from a study of tone mapping.
I get where he's going. This is a very interesting way to start. He's establishing progress because I guess where he's going to go, I'm just going to give what I think, and then we'll see where he's going. I guess where he's going to go is show that there's progress going on in the world, but when it's reported on the news, the media is going to show you and try to frighten you, which it is true, actually. I just learned something the other day that there's such a thing as newsworthy, which means if you go tell the media, my kid or 5 mothers gave birth in the same hospital at the same time, it might not be newsworthy. But if you say there was an explosion in the hospital and 5 babies died, the mothers lost their limbs, the doctors lost their heads, that is newsworthy, which means they look for something frightening to show the public and try to prove that there's no progress. I feel like that's what he's trying to establish. But let's take it back. I like the illustration.
Now, given all of these positive trends over the last 70 years, how have they been reflected in the news? Well, here's one more graph. This comes from a study of tone mapping, where an algorithm simply counts up the number of positive words like improve, good, better, versus negative words like horrific, catastrophe, crisis, worse, and so on. And the black line shows the positive versus negative tone of the New York Times from 1945 to the present. The blue line shows a digest of news media from across the world. And as you can see, during the decades in which the world has been getting better and better, the news has been getting glummer and glummer. So the question is, why has our depiction of the world and our objective measures of the world gone in opposite directions? Why do intellectuals and journalists, or so many of them, deny progress? There are a couple of psychological explanations. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky many decades ago proposed that the human mind assesses risk via a shortcut they call the availability heuristic. Namely, the people estimate probability according to how easily they can recall examples from memory. If you can call to mind a terrorist attack, a belching smokestack, an oil-covered seabird, then those images stay with you, and that's how you judge the state of the environment, the state of crime, the state of war. If you combine that with the nature of the news, the cliche is if it bleeds, it leads, and there are actually studies that show that that is accurate. That is, if you give a sample of newspaper editors possible stories with the content held constant, but with a positive or a negative spin, they will choose the ones with the negative spin. This interacts with another part of our psychology, sometimes called the negativity bias, summarized in the slogan, "Bad is stronger than good." Losses hurt more than gains buoy us up. Criticism stings more than praise flatters. Trauma has more lasting negative effects than good fortune has positive effects.
I learned a lot of this. I recommend that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think that's how it's called. I learned a lot of this in that book, and it was just amazing. So there was a story in that book I'm just going to quickly share. Don't worry, I'll take the video back, but it's a reaction and a discussion, so we should talk. Something in that book that was very remarkable, a story. So there was a pilot, right? He flew his plane, and then the engines got bad on air. The plane was supposed to crash, but the pilot was experienced, and then he landed the plane safely. When they checked, or when he landed, he asked that they check the oil in the plane or the gas in the plane. It turned out the person who was supposed to service the plane put in the wrong gas or whatever, I don't know the right name, but put in the wrong petroleum product in the plane. And the person who did the servicing was so frightened because he could have killed somebody. This is a plane. If the plane crashed, the pilot would have died, and whoever was on the plane would have died. But when the pilot went up to the service guy, while the service guy was panicking, instead of criticizing the service guy, he told him, service my next plane on my other plane. So I'll be sure that you've learned to do it right. Something like that, I'm paraphrasing. He didn't criticize him. Rather, he made him service another plane for him to be sure he has learned and he's going to do it right. That story changed my life. Like, that story is just remarkable. This is not an ad for that book, but I recommend you read that book, How to Influence People, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Hopefully I'm not turning it around, but it's a very good book. You'll learn a lot of what he's talking about and how to use negatives and positive words when, addressing your relationship with people.
Summarized in the slogan, bad is stronger than good. Losses hurt more than gains buoy us up. Criticism stings more than praise flatters. Trauma has more lasting negative effects than good fortune has positive effects, and so on. And I think that the negativity bias creates a kind of gravitas market, namely that we are vigilant for things that go wrong, opening up a niche for people to remind us of things that have gone wrong that we may not have noticed. Tom Lehrer, the great philosopher, social critic, and satirical songwriter, said, "Always predict the worst and you'll be hailed as a prophet." The result, I think, has mixed.
I like that. Let me take it back. Always predict the worst and you'd be a prophet.
Noticed. Tom Lehrer, the great philosopher, social critic, and satirical songwriter, said, "Always predict the worst and you'll be hailed as a prophet." The result, I think,
the worst might likely happen.
Mixed. It is obviously a good thing if people are aware of problems, and that can motivate them to solve them. And I have many examples where simply putting a hitherto neglected social problem on the agenda can lead to measures that improve it. Violence against women is an example that became a public issue starting in the 1970s, and indeed rates of sexual assault, rates of domestic violence went steadily downward in the decades since. On the other hand, it can also lead to a kind of cynicism that the system is so corrupt, so evil, so dysfunctional that we may as well smash the machine. We should drain the swamp. There's no hope of improvement. It is corrupted beyond redemption. And some evidence that may have had an effect in recent political events comes from this graph that plots the support for three populist movements: the votes for Donald Trump, votes for Brexit, and a composite of votes for European populist parties as a function of birth cohort. So this is not time across the x-axis, time in which the survey was taken. This is year of birth. And as you can see, populism is an old man's movement. By old man, I mean baby boomers and older. But the younger the cohort, the lower the support. Unfortunately, young people don't vote. If young people voted even a few percentage points higher rate of participation than they did, the results of these elections would be very different. And so there are many explanations.
To add to that, Vivek Ramaswamy said in an interview that 60% of young people would give up their rights to vote rather than give up TikTok.
But one of them, I think, is the widespread feeling that the system is just so broken that there's no difference among candidates, that Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, what's the difference? They'll both just shore up a rotten system. And so you have a large percentage of especially younger people who either don't vote or vote for third-party candidates who have no hope of winning. There is an alternative, which I argue for in the book, that, three laws that I took from the physicist David Deutsch from his book, The Beginning of Infinity, not as don't get the blood pumping as much as a charismatic authoritarian leader, but if we could find a way of bringing this into people's consciousness as the way to approach our problems, I think we'd be better off. And that is, problems are inevitable, problems are solvable, solutions create new problems which can be solved in their turn. I don't think that this would easily fit on a bumper sticker or a lapel button, but if we took this attitude towards the state of the world, I think we would be better off. Thanks very much.
That was an incredible speech. very incredible. And one thing about these intellectuals, I noticed the same thing with Ben Carson. They do and say all these things in a very calm manner that if you're not paying attention, you could miss the point. So he started basically by showing you a graph that the world is progressing from the 1820s. If you had seen the poverty or the extreme poverty line from the 1820s to like 2015, it's been declining. In 2020s, it's about 10%. Meanwhile, in 1820s, it was 90%. But when he compared that to what the news and the media, the tone of the media is showing, that the media is being a lot more negative. When the graph should be going from negative to positive, the media is going from positive downwards to negative. So it does make sense. I like when people show things like that statistically, because you can't forget it now that you've seen the numbers. And for a lot of people that keep thinking the world is so bad, the world is so horrible, maybe it's just because a lot of people are saying the world is so horrible. I was talking to my friend the other day, and he was saying, how do people make money in this city? I live in Vancouver. That is so expensive. This is so hard. It's so difficult. I'm like, there are people driving Rolls Royce, building houses, everyday infrastructure, a lot of things going on. It may be difficult, but there are people making it one way or the other. So join that mindset, that school of thought of the people making it. And also, what I like to tell people is be careful what you verbalize. Be careful with your words. Wake up in the morning and feel like the richest person, at least with your words. Talk yourself into it. Yeah, and also this is another problem too. The words of the media, I feel like it really does influence the people, because people feel poor, people feel divided, people feel like their countries are a lot worse than it really is. And to a lot of people, when Americans speak about poverty, it's laughable, because now this might be controversial, but America is a lot richer than a lot of countries. So poverty in America to other people is kind of like, that's not poverty. Like, there's no way anybody can fathom. It's like homelessness, right? There are lots of NGOs in America feeding the homeless. In other countries, if you're homeless, you're preparing to die. Like, there's nothing for you, no food. Nobody's feeding you. Even some people that are not homeless, they still need the food. Like, the homeless people in America are doing a lot better than them. So be careful what you hear and what you take from the media. That's the point. That was a very, very, very good speech. Like, I don't think it has enough views as it should have. Let me see. 200,000. I feel like it should have a lot more, because that was a message everybody needs to hear. If you have this mindset, you're going to win for sure. Why Do Progressives Hate Progress by Steven Pinker. Feel free to share your thoughts. If there's anything you want to add, correct, or critique, feel free to do so. Smash the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace.